Let us fight for a new world, a decent world, that will give men a chance to work, that will give youth a future and old age a security. By the promise of these things, brutes have risen to power, but they lie. They do not fulfill that promise. They never will. Dictators free themselves, but they enslave the people.
Welcome to Rabble Rants. I'm Santiago Helo Quintero, and alongside Jesse McLean, we're going to unpack the stories that have us most riled up and challenge the narratives around them.
All right, so Jagmeet pulled the plug on his deal with the Liberals. This is the Confidence and Supply Agreement, CASA, as folks have nicknamed it. They crafted this in some back room somewhere back in spring of 2022. I have no sense of time anymore, but I believe I'm correct on that one. So the deal is dead if you believe Jagmeet's video, which I will subject you to later in the episode, so my guest here can react to it again. Because I've got some reactions I want to share as well. So obviously we need to unpack all of this. What does it mean for Canadian politics? More importantly, what does it mean for our movements? And generally, I get in a really good mood when we get to be critical of the NDP. And I'm happy that Scott Martin, our guest here, is also equally enthusiastic about shining a bit of a spotlight on politicians and their tricks. Welcome, Scott. Welcome back. You got to come on here. How long ago was that? It was this summer to talk about people getting their panties in a knot about Stonehenge.
Yeah, it was a couple months ago. Yes. And now I'm back to talk about, I think it's something we both share deeply is the NDP as a political organization in electoral politics. And I don't know, there's just so much to unpack with this deal, like the legacy of it, their moves, why they're pulling out, why they're pulling out now. Like, I think there's a lot that actually isn't getting covered in a lot of like analysis of it. So I'm glad that, you know, we get a chance to sit down and talk about it and talk about the announcement itself, because I have some weird questions about that as well. So I'm excited to get into every little bit of that. So thanks for having me on.
Happy when someone's like enthusiastic to talk about this, because a lot of people, especially in this precarious political situation that progressives seem to have found themselves in, where the Conservatives are the likely next winners of an election. And so shit-talking the NDP, and we will be shit-talking the NDP. I mean, I think most people are sitting there going back and forth asking the question, should he have done this right now, yes or no? You know, strategically. A lot of the discussion is not leveraging around like ideologically or morally, should he have done this, or it's like optically why it's a bad or good move depending on who's looking at it.
Mm-hmm. I think that, I mean, I'll start off with like my cards on the table. I think the deal was always a bad deal. I think that they shouldn't have made it, even for the gains they had. And we'll talk about some of the gains because I don't want to be completely negative. But even, like, so my position is they should have pulled out. Unfortunately, because the NDP is just the NDP, they decided to do it in possibly the worst way and the worst timing I could even possibly think of. Now, for those who are unaware, basically, they pulled out yesterday when we're recording now, so it was September 4th. Singh announced that they were pulling out. Not a week before that, Pierre Poilievre, leader of the Conservatives, pulled a press conference and sent Singh a letter. And essentially, I'm not going to repeat all his garbage, but essentially he said, I know you're waiting for your pension.
I didn't know there was a letter.
Yeah, there was a letter. He's like, I know you're waiting for your pension, but you yourself have admitted that everything is worse now. Everything costs more, and you're going to be known as Sellout Singh because he's trying to do like a mini Trump thing. And I was like, we're working on a piece for the Catch, so when you're listening to this, it might be out there about this. And I couldn't find a response from Singh himself. Like, there was NDP responses. I think it was Peter Julian and then Anne McGrath. But Singh, I don't think, responded to it.
Yes, he did. Yes, he did.
He did?
Well, a week later, I'm thinking...
Oh,
I felt like you were teeing me up for that,
did.
Scott. You know, I felt.
Oh no.
I have a video. I'm going to share it with us. I think this is his response. No, I mean, like, it's really hard to argue that it has nothing to do with that.
Do you want to play it now? Do we want to get into his response to Poilievre's just like craven opportunism?
I do, but I want to speculate a little first. We're going to tease folks with that. I still want to speculate a little bit more on the timing, because surely there has to be an other reason that they are telling themselves or their members, right? If you're going to say that Pierre did not bully you into this, then why specifically in this moment? I mean, we're still a week from them ordering workers back to work for the umpteenth time. So, and it wasn't a genocide or support of the Israeli state that's continued in the last 10, almost 11 months. So what are they? And even if when we listen to the statement, I promise you, no one here will know why specifically now any of what he's saying has changed. So, like, what do you think, Scott? What were they thinking?
So, from what I could read, apparently them pulling out of the deal may have been in the works for a couple weeks, so maybe before Poilievre's comments. So that's one thing. Why I think they're doing it now is because I think they're about to resit for Parliament. I think it's September 16th that they're all going back. And I think Singh and the NDP were thinking, if we pull out now, we'll look like we have principles. You know, nobody likes Trudeau. And when we go back in, we'll be able to stand on our own 2 feet, and we'll be able to be like, you know, we had this deal, we got this thing out of it, now it's time to, et cetera, et cetera. So that's why I think they did it. And I've seen some arguments that, like, the rail worker lockout and the Liberals, like, essentially forcing workers back to work was, like, the inciting incident for this.
It better have been.
I'm curious as to why that didn't come up at all when Singh does his thing, and we will go through it, like, there's no indication that is even a part of it.
Because he wants to leave open the possibility for him to have all kinds of reasons, very noble reasons, right? He'll say it's like layers of things the Liberals have done that make me better than them. So he can distinguish himself from the Liberals now. Well, he'll try, but it'll be hard because he supported them for so long with such weak critique. Yeah, if he's very specific on the striking workers, then one, he would have to never do the same. Anyway, he would be beholden to, like, that topic either way, right? That would be the discussion point. Again, we're going to play that video now, and we'll let Jagmeet answer for himself.
It's only fair that we give him a seat at the table here.
Today, I notified the Prime Minister that I've ripped up the supply and confidence agreement. Canadians are fighting a battle for the future of the middle class. Justin Trudeau has proven again and again he will always cave to corporate greed. The Liberals have let people down. They don't deserve another chance. There is an even bigger battle ahead. The threat of Pierre Poilievre and conservative cuts from workers, from retirees, from young people, from patients, from families. He will cut in order to give more to big corporations and wealthy CEOs. The fact is, the Liberals are too weak, too selfish, and too beholden to corporate interests to fight for people. They cannot be the change. They cannot restore the hope. They cannot stop the Conservatives, but we can. In the next federal election, Canadians will choose between Pierre Poilievre's callous cuts or hope. Hope that when we stand united, we win. That Canada's middle class will once again thrive together. In Canada, we take care of our neighbors. That's who we are. I've embraced that value my whole life. I'm running for Prime Minister because together we can and will stop conservative cuts. We can deliver relief and restore hope. Fix healthcare, build homes you can afford, stop price gouging. It's always impossible until it isn't. It can't be done until someone does it. If we're together, nothing is impossible. And we won't let them tell us it can't be done. Big corporations and wealthy CEOs have had their government. It's the people's time.
Well, I'll tell you, it doesn't hit any different the second time around. That still makes me so I cringe. I know this is only audio. I am cringing. I'm stuck in a cringe.
I wish the listeners could have seen our faces at multiple times during that, because we were both just like bracing ourselves for that. And I mean, can we start with the middle class thing? What's that about? Have they been doing that for a while?
Oh, that is the first note on my notes right there. Yes, but they were warned away from it. We did get him saying the working class for a little bit, but we're too close to an election or possible election now, Scott. So we got to rein in the communism, rein it in, and it's back to liberal speak. Battle for the future of the middle class, in case if any of you missed that, one of those first lines there. And the imagery, a lot of it is workers in the background.
Well, and so that's the thing that gets me. Poilievre is doing such a good messaging job pretending that he cares about the working class, except for that one video where he was using stock footage from like Russia or whatever. But he's appealing to people who think themselves as workers, and he's doing the imaging. It's all completely hollow. But having Singh, like, just as like a comparative note, talk about the middle class and using the same imagery but refusing to, like, I don't know, give any specifics, is just like, it's the most own goal thing I could possibly think of. So why is that the focus?
And how sad to all these years later that they consistently keep invoking Jack Layton to sway voters. He doesn't say it here, but he uses lines from Jack's last letter, and then he's been tweeting explicitly saying, you know, a man gave us hope one time, or a recipe for success. I don't know the verbiage he uses, but like, they treat him like a deity because they have no substance within them at this point. They're hearkening back to times that people can hardly even remember, and that a lot of NDPers have mistakenly remembered as some with nostalgia. Only because of the amount of seats he gained. But they forget that we have done extensive amount of interviews now, episodes dedicated to the deliberate turn the party took under Layton towards center. So for me, I hear him hearkening to Layton and I'm like, yeah, that's on brand for you. But it's actually put out there to dupe progressives and to pull on those heartstrings that folks had for Jack, and that image that they just keep hitting home over and over and over again. Like, it's because there's you hear that whole ad, he only invokes fear of conservatism and provides nothing. He provides no promise of anything there. Just, it was such hollow words, and then spoken by a man who had no emotion in his voice. Even if you watch the video, he doesn't look like he believes anything he's saying at all. You see the tan line where his Rolex was.
That's, like, honestly, I think it's the most banal thing for me, but it's also one of the most important. Like, to be the leader of a federal party that is, you know, regularly covered, you have to have some level of charisma. And Singh had it. I don't know what happened, but it seems like he's just, like, asleep at the wheel, and, you know, this is all, like, boring. And at a time where, like, the most exciting option is coming from the far right and the co-opting, eating the NDP's lunch, you don't even have like the stage presence to, like, try to convince people who already follow you. I mean, like, I'm sure the diehards are gonna they'll do whatever, but you can't win an election or get enough seats with just the diehards. And it's clear that's the only thing the NDP is even has as a goal. I don't even want to say they're trying to do it, but, like, the lack of charisma, the focus on the middle class, doing it immediately after Poilievre calls you out on it.
Can you imagine being in the planning room?
That's a good question. I want to know who came up with this and how many people.
Oh, I know exactly who they are. I can picture the table there. You got Anne McGrath will be in the mix, and Jagmeet's chief of staff, Jennifer Howard, and all of the consultants that have circled the party, Brian Topp and his friends. I'm not even going to bother naming the other fucks. But they all sit there and they have been plotting this for a long time, because eventually you have to pull out of the deal before you go into an election, right? You can just wait until June 2025 when the deal was supposed to last until, because, like, strategically that wouldn't make any sense. You would have literally cozied up to the government that entire time, just in time to call the election. And then you expect your canvassers to go door to door and somehow convince anybody that you are any different than what's in power, during which is the worst time of many people's lives.
Yeah.
We are not only witnessing a genocide in real time, but most of us are broke as hell. And it doesn't matter whose fault it is, really. There is someone in power, and generally they don't get to stay there when times are this bad.
Yeah. And I think the election is something that a lot has been dealt with. I mean, I kind of jokingly, it was like, oh, there's going to be an election coming when they said he has an announcement. But to be clear, the collapsing of this deal doesn't mean that there's going to be an election. It means that there is a possibility. But I think the NDP is at least savvy enough to know that if they pulled out of the deal and then did a no confidence vote, that they'd basically have, like you said, they'd have no runway to like distance themselves from the Liberals. The problem is when you do this a week after Poilievre asks you to pull out of the deal and cause a no confidence vote, and you do half of that, you look like you're trying to have it both ways. So, I mean, I don't know what goes into it, but if they had delayed like at least another week, it would have given them this space. And I think you're right. I think, we are going to have the election next year. I don't see any reason why, unless maybe the Bloc decides to throw their weight behind it. But even that's like, I don't know. But just this positioning is so weird.
Well, chances are the Liberal government will introduce some sort of economic bill in the fall sitting. And those are the times that you're going to have a no confidence vote and a danger to the Liberal. But the Liberals also want to get stuff done. So they're either going to have to cozy up to the NDP in other ways, or they'll cozy up to the Conservatives. And I don't think the Conservatives are going to hand the Liberals any kind of win anytime now, unless it's, I don't know. I could be wrong on that. They can be kind of unpredictable. But if you're telling me, like, not you, Scott, I'm not, but there are people out there, talking about how now the NDP actually has leverage with the Liberals. And doesn't that make you look back at the deal in a really different way? Not you, Scott, but those people out there that thought the deal was like the only way to get anything done. But now is when you have leverage, when you're out of the deal. Like, could it not be more obvious how weak of a position? And I had a little funny moment because I'm reading the CTV article, really kind of dry explanation of what the deal means. I just wanted to absorb what the legacy media was putting out. And they just had a section there on, what was the agreement? And just the way they described it was just eating Jagmeet's lunch. And then it was like, well, what would be the difference between that and a coalition? And it was like, well, a coalition would have actually given you seats in the cabinet and some actual clout. I mean, that's not the language they used, but it was just, nothing made it more obvious that the NDP selected a non-leader. I'd never looked at him as bored before, but that really does encapsulate how he comes across right now. And we know from talking to insiders that he doesn't run the party. He doesn't run meetings, like he doesn't drive them. He doesn't drive any of the real initiatives. He allows people to manage the party for him, and he is a spokesperson. And a lot of parties are designed that way now, where the leader is just an image. It's a brand. And changing that requires a whole brand change. And so, like a corporate perspective, that has cost, risk. You don't know, what target market you end up going to hit with the new ads, with the new branding. It's a crapshoot. So a lot of people talking about whether or not only will this trigger an election, but will it trigger a leadership change? Because, the election right now does hinge on what the Liberals try to introduce and whether or not the NDP will stand with it or not. I'm with you, Sky. Like, it was always a bad idea, and there was never a good or bad time to pull out of it. Whenever. It should have happened long time ago. There probably should have been a million things that should have triggered this. A lot of people would say the fact that there was no disability supports really for in any of the budgets. I mean, what they did introduce, I'm not even going to acknowledge because it's just so problematic. And the fact the electoral reform was never included in the deal sits really poorly with people, because that's like the one thing they could have included that maybe would have prevented us from having a lot of these problems over and over again, having to play these political games, these partisan games, at least so heavily.
Yeah, well, I think talking about actually what the deal accomplished is, I mean, it's kind of necessary about this because there's some good things, I guess. Like, there was 10-day sick days for federal government workers. There was anti-scab legislation, which I don't think is in effect yet. I think it takes effect in 2025. And when I say there's good things, I mean those are objectively good things. But you also have to ask.
Same with pharma.
I want to get to that too. But you have to ask how much of this is going to stay when the Conservatives get in power. Because even if the Conservatives don't win the next government election, which I think they're going to win, but even if they don't, it's not like we're going to indefinitely have a Liberal government until Canada explodes in a fireball of, like, forest fires. Like, how much of this is going to stay? And the two big pillars are the dental care and the pharmacare, which have been two of the most, like, pathetic rollouts I've honestly seen in quite a while.
Yeah, I have a little anecdote to share. I was driving into the city of Toronto, and there was a radio spot on for a dentist, and it was completely, the whole ad was dedicated to the fact that they have enrolled in the program, that they would accept poor folks. They made it just so
bless the real heroes,
good people. I think some of the lines where we believe everyone deserves dental care, it sounded like some of Jagmeet's statements on the issue. And, come find us now. Here's our 1-800 number. Don't worry, we take poor folks here. And it was just, I mean, the dental care introduced means testing into our healthcare system. I mean, yes, of course, it will help some people, but you guys supported the Liberals for a long time. You think you would have had a little bit more sway on how both of pharmacare and dental care rolled out. You didn't get a lot. I mean, you supported them for a very long time through very tumultuous years for Canadians and all the people who live here. I hate using the term Canadians, right? But so long. And the fact that we have like this very small list of things that we can kind of credit maybe to the NDP to some degree, but they clearly had no real input on it. Or if they did, and the means testing was their idea, then we have even more reason to be upset, right? But these are to be fair though, Scott, any legislation that is brought in can be removed by the next government. There's very little that is, secured into place, especially when it's dependent on such short-term funding.
That's a good point, and I'm glad you brought that up. And I think maybe the way I phrase that is because I think a lot of the times when things are not repealed is because it has so much popular support. Like for example, we are seeing a huge privatization of healthcare across the provinces. But no government is introducing a bill being like, we're going to privatize healthcare, because there would be absolute outrage. Imagine, if you will, a competent NDP that has pharmacare in the deal, universal, implemented, every Canadian doesn't have to pay for any of their drugs, like at the counter. Imagine that being in place for like 2 years, and then Poilievre comes in and says, I'm going to get rid of that. He can't. There's no one who can, because there would be riots in the streets, pretty much. But when your deal has pharmacare, and I was reviewing this because I was like, wasn't it like a mess? They agreed initially, when they signed it in March 2022, to have legislation by the end of the year of 2023. Basically, in late November, the Liberals were like, it's not going to happen. Whoops. And then the NDP was like, well, I guess we'll extend it, because what leverage do we have? And they extended it to March 1st of this year, 2024, and then they tabled it a day before. Like, how more like useless can you look if you say, okay, we have a deal? Actually, no, it's fine. You could take a bit longer. Last day before it happens. Yeah, I guess. Okay. Like, and then the rollout is in piecemeal anyway. So it's not like it was instant universal pharmacare. Like, I think it's not fully implemented until next year, but even that's like piecemeal. Like, it's just, it boggles my mind what people think you can get out of this.
Well, yeah. And when it is a rollout, although you could say, oh, the structure is there, the framework is there. Yes, of course, these are important things to move towards. But strategically, let's go back to strategically as the NDP going into a possible election, you can't go door to door bragging about something that nobody's experienced yet, some theoretical pharmacare framework. No one cares about the framework for anything when they can't pay their bills right then and there, and you haven't been able to differentiate yourself from the people who they're blaming. So you've given no bargaining power to your MPs throughout this process, clearly, by what we've been given and what we've had to swallow. Like, they propped up a government supporting a genocide who regularly get up there and reaffirm Israel's right to defend itself. And, they're sitting there saying that they're doing everything possible because Heather McPherson is standing up and trying to use their little bits of power on legislation aimed at charities and this bullshit arms embargo that never happened. And never once did they think to maybe leverage the deal for that. They never wanted to risk any of that for something that almost all of their base is working towards at the moment. So it's hard for any NDP, even hard partisan, to look at this and get super excited and feel like it happened at the right moment, that it took a moral stand that set them apart from the Liberals. Because it didn't. It doesn't have that feel at all. And even if it was triggered by sending those railroad workers back to work after being locked out, it didn't happen soon enough after that happened. If they were talking about it, they should have just done it. The fact that even though a small amount of people made this decision, but they still took so long with it is just fucking pathetic. You need to be able to move as a party fast when it matters, but they clearly dragged their feet on this, and I bet you they were sitting there shitting themselves when Pierre dropped that letter to them and made that big hoopla about pulling the plug. They completely had the rug pulled out from under them. They thought they were sitting there, they probably had all these strategy meetings, they were gonna make a spectacle of this pullout, and now I think the tables have turned on them. I'm not sure anybody's happy with how it happened.
Definitely touched on a couple things, like the non-binding motion earlier this year to recognize Palestine as a state that was watered down to nothing. To not even threaten, allude to be in Parliament and be like, this is clearly an issue that matters to Canadians. Like, I think there was a poll from Ledger in June. It was 45% of Canadians believe that Israel is committing genocide. So to not even go up and say, this government is acting as though it's completely, infallible and unbeholden to anybody. And we all know that's not true. Even to just allude to it wasn't done. They didn't do it with the railroad labor situation. And I think you're right that they were definitely scrambling after Polyev made that comment, because I was reviewing a CBC article about their response, and Anne McGrath said it's not his decision to make. Well, no shit, it's not his decision to make. He's the conservative leader. But to not even see it coming, that Polyev would ask you publicly and in a very humiliating manner to pull out of this deal when he has been calling this government the Liberal NDP coalition government for months. And it's 2 to 3 weeks before you sit and you're just we are gonna just completely sail to political wins when we say we're pulling out of the deal, and then not even readjust when you basically get the wind taken out of your sails. What the hell's going on there? I genuinely don't understand.
Sometimes I wonder, well, I know that because I've sat in those provincial council meetings and convention, and I've heard them talk about their strategy to appeal to conservative voters. I wonder if there was some part of that play into the psyche, because I disagree with you earlier. Maybe I didn't understand you, but they don't really give a shit about their diehards. They take advantage of those people. They assume their allegiance and are willing to even go against their most strict values or important issues, and they know they'll still be there for the most part. I mean, many have fled, but the diehards that are still there will probably never leave. But they've been very open with wanting to use their ad space to appeal to conservative and liberal voters, not to people who don't vote, not to the 50-60% of people who don't vote. They are specifically have a very niche market that their consultants have advised them to go after. And quite often we see them playing into that hand. And even the ad you hear and reverting back to middle class language and the imagery that they use, it's very, using the word Canadians and invoking that, because I don't think everyone sees themselves as workers. I mean, folks do kind of sit on that Canadian identity that he is appealing to as well.
Yeah.
And I think, they're trying to play themselves pretty wide at this point. Maybe because they've lost the hard leftists. Not their diehard, but the folks that know the party doesn't represent their values anymore. They've also kind of forgotten about appealing to those, because I don't think there's any going back to those people.
No, maybe I misspoke, but I agree with you with the treatment of the diehards. I think that they do take them for granted, and they don't need to appeal to them because they'll always vote for them. But I do think that this is just like the appealing to the Canadianness too. Well, Canadians take care of their neighbors. That's just who we are. I don't know. Like, that vision's been shattered in so many ways to people paying attention. And I think this is something that we were talking a little bit before about the usefulness of electoralism. And this is one of those situations where it kind of highlights how important electoralism is, but not in the way that electoralists think. Like, if the NDP were 4 seats and all they ever did was say, this is how the system works, it will never work for you, I am a representative of you, and you should lead like the conversation and raise it up in Parliament every time and basically say the working class allows this to happen, the working class allows this to happen, this is genocide, etc., etc., etc. They would be far more impactful than this middling, centrist, socialist, disavowing, like, zombified party that only seems to care about perpetuating itself. And I feel like we really lose that because we don't have any elected MP that says stuff like that. We have some are close. There are some in the NDP who are close. I wouldn't say they're sufficient, so I don't want to discount that. But there's just like so much that could actually be said. And I think one of the things that the NDP is thinking about is, well, we want to keep the same level of seats or build the seats. And, you know, talking about that stuff is not going to build seats. It's not going to build a party. Well, guess what? This shit is not going to build your party either. You are digging your own grave and then pointing at, like, a gravedigger or whoever you think is one and be like, well, he's doing it wrong. I'm doing it right. Like, there's just a complete boxing out of the hard left voices. And in a time when Israel is committing so much genocide that Canada supports, Canada is selling arms to the U.S. that goes directly to Israel. Like, that's been reported. I mean, it's also been covered on this podcast. Like, this is something that is a wide opportunity to just actually build more working class solidarity. And it's not that they aren't doing it well. It's that they're not even trying. And I think that's more indicative than anything of the NDP.
I think also it's such a lost opportunity that if you were going to be in the spotlight in this moment, and I know I even talked why strategically, I think Jagmeet left that statement without substance. I mean, we all know why politicians operate without substance, but why he didn't say, like, this is the stand I took. You know, workers. You're not going to send workers back to work. We're tired of seeing this. It's a time we actually did something to defend workers and made it about that, because they never ever see their job as shifting the political spectrum or reshaping the narratives around issues. They're always playing that game that you talk about. How many seats can we get? Where can we get them? Where can we strategically pour our money and resources into because it's a close race? What does this market research tell us about this particular ad and how it will be received? Not how it will reshape the people seeing it. You know, that's how we operate. I mean, that's how I create content. I'm not looking to run for office, though. I'm not playing that game. But that's useful. That is playing a role in the leftist movement. But if you are simply just speaking in the language of neoliberals and worrying about what is palatable rather than making something a little tastier for folks, then you're never going to make these even incremental political gains that we think we need the electoral for. Right? Not only, like Scott said, could all of these things be repealed at one point, right? So even if you do get, oh, well, dental care is historic and pharmacare is historic. Yes, they are, but it would have been more historic if you reasserted some of the ideological reasons behind them in those moments, right? And that's just something the NDP has not done for a very, very, very long time. Like once they decided to just play the neoliberal game, it was easier. They could just follow the model in front of them of the liberals and just try to do it better or shinier or with a more progressive slant to their language. And the longer they've gone on, the worse they've become at that, frankly. And this will reflect in the polls. A lot of fear around a conservative government. And we've talked about it on the show how, yes, definitely substantive differences between liberals and conservatives, especially for certain communities. We've talked about this at length. But really, the roles that we talk about here on the show, organizing, activism, and all of that, the other work that we do outside of the circus of partisanship, that will be the same. That will be the same. The work will be the same. The goals will still be the same. And your approach to power, the powerful, should still be the same. Right? Whoever wins or loses. But yeah, the CASA deal is dead, but I actually don't think people will notice much of a difference when they sit in September. I don't think the NDP are in a position to want to go to an election either. Because you can hear the fear in his, if you do hear any emotion in his voice, he seems to fear the conservatives, rightly so. But I mean, he says he's running for prime minister. I thought that was interesting. He's assuming he's going to be the leader in the next election.
This has been a thing that when he said when I'm prime minister and that, it reminded me, and this was mainly shared by like right-wing accounts, but I think it is something that the left needs to know about as well. It was like, was it like December 2022 or something like that? Singh stood up in Parliament and he said, when I'm prime minister, and the room erupted in laughter. And I was like, why would you give them an opening? Because that would be like Yves Blanchette of the Bloc Québécois being like, when I'm prime minister. He rightfully says, I'm never going to be prime minister. I'm here to represent Quebec. I thought it was a one-off thing. This is something that I don't know if he truly believes it, but this is clearly like a line that is in the NDP playbook. And it doesn't play well. It makes you sound out of touch, which it is. And there was a post by, I think it was Polling Canada, and they said probably what's going to happen is they're going to pull out of the deal, and then they will still support the Liberals through confidence votes. My post about that, I just said, this is the most pathetic thing imaginable. So the NDP is 100% going to do it. Because I don't see them polling for an election before the end of the year. It just doesn't make any sense. And I think, I don't want to get into too much punditry about what the polls are going to show, but they're not in a good position. And the only position that the NDP had historically that was worth anything was siding with working people. You can criticize to the extent to which they did it, or the CCF, but there were substantial gains that they did achieve. And since, middle of Jack Layton, definitely since Mulcair, that has been something from the base that they project on to the NDP. And the NDP is fine with it because they're okay with that image, but they don't think they're going to win with that. And it's never been more clear than it is now.
Yeah, I mean, if there was ever a time for a brand change, I believe it would be now. I think admitting that the deal didn't work and they have to stand alone as something new can only be done with a different leader. No one's going to buy into that when it's the same person who's been the face of this deal the whole time. Will I think that will substantially change anything within the party? Absolutely not. And I think that's why you don't even see a lot of NDPers calling for leadership changes, because they know it won't really make a difference. I don't believe they see anybody in the caucus that would make a big difference in the party. Optically, do they think they might be more appealing to voters? Maybe. But, then you go through a leadership race, or you're supposed to. The party doesn't really believe in those anymore, but I don't think you could get away with it federally the way that they've fixed the races provincially. So federally, you're going to call everybody out to start shitting on each other? That might not be the best timing for that either, right? To remind people how bad Jagmeet has done, right? So it doesn't install a lot of faith, because I don't think you're going to bring a lot of people back into the party with a leadership race either, because they won't allow radicals. I use that term with a grain of salt. It's, people like us to get up on that stage at a leadership race and really tell it like it is. Only that, I think, would actually revive the party, still for really bad ends. It would still just serve to exhaust the left. I was on another podcast recently with Corey Johnson. He does The Skeptical Lefty. And prior to going on his show, you fill out a questionnaire. The guests fill out a questionnaire. And one of the questions, like friend and foe. So for friend, I put tenant unions. Anyone who listens to the show, they don't need any explanation. Listen to last week's episode, you'll get it. Anyway, but for foe, I actually put the NDP. Because I feel like I just want to reiterate it here on my podcast in case you folks haven't been listening. I mean, I think this is time to also plug. We have an entire playlist called Inside the NDP that gives all the receipts for all of my vitriol. Anyway, why are the NDP my foe? I could have picked a lot of people like Polyev. There are a lot of people that are ideological enemies. But I think, the resources and hope that go into the NDP and the way that they keep us reined in as a left collective, I think is so more detrimental and unexpected, right? It hits people from the side rather than on front. They're expecting to battle conservatives. They know how to argue with them. They understand the differences. But when somebody is like a wolf in sheep's clothing, I think that's far more dangerous. And in the end, that's really what you have with the NDP. So I kind of laugh when people are really like, should he pulled it now? Should he not pulled it now? And I know I've just dedicated an episode to it. But in the end, it doesn't really matter. It's all just political gamesmanship, folks. It's all just theater for us. And they're all just trying to do the same thing. And that is get reelected. That is it. That is it. And none of it will benefit us. Not one of those wins. Not one. I'm telling you, you could get 12 seats, 23 seats. I don't think folks will really feel a difference, in their communities.
I agree entirely. It's like that Malcolm X quote where, the wolf is your enemy, but the fox comes at you in a way where you think he's smiling and I think it's, I am obsessed with electoral politics despite myself. I know it's not the answer, and I think it's become even more clear. And I agree that the NDP is, the more we can use this event, because you're right, I don't think anything's going to change. And, we did spend a while talking about it. But the reason we are talking about it, at least I hope, on this podcast, is that it exemplifies something unchangeable within the NDP, the electoral system, the way the system is set up, especially since neoliberalism hit Canada hard in the 90s under the Liberals, is that it's just all going to come to a point where it's all their goals are against the working class. It's always going to be like that. And the only way you can kind of mitigate that is if you do have a concerted effort to get into that system only in order to decry it. This is failing because this and this. This is we don't have healthcare because there are interests that governments are intentionally fostering to be against the working class. All this, like, why is healthcare failing? It's being dismantled. The only reason that you should get in that system is to use it to decry it. And the more people who realize, oh, voting every 3-4 years, whatever, isn't going to fix things, because it is one of the only avenues that the system says that you can express yourself in an appropriate manner. And that's the whole point. They're saying that because they don't want us to express ourselves in other manners. And, you know, we've been talking the NDP and this deal and saying the whole structure. And it's not just the NDP. It's all of them. But the NDP is the only one that has the audacity to say, actually, no, we're on your side. So what are you going to do? That's what gets me.
It's, sorry, I'm giggling because I'm just thinking of how they're trying to market this as though Jagmeet is very brave and he has ripped up the agreement. You know, that's the language they use, like as though he shredded it up. Like it's some sort of fucking noble act. And I really don't have a whole lot of comment on that except for it made me laugh.
In the name of the middle class, too. I'm doing this for them.
The fuck you are. Like, the
else.
fuck you are. As though, like, you know, because, you know, if you're my audience here, you have heard endless acts of defiance, actual acts of defiance where people are taking actual risks with their livelihood, with their freedom, with their safety on the streets, right? Going up against their ideological foes in ways that are fucking dangerous to them. And this man has the audacity to put together a polished video like he's our fucking hero because he pulled out of a shit deal that he made in the first place when he didn't consult anybody but the same slugs managing the party into oblivion. Fuck him. Sorry. That's why it's called Rabble Rants.
No, I honestly think that we should end on that, and I think that is so important to tell people. That's why all the legacy media is like very cold and sterile and be like, well, this deal happened and, you know, this one stalled and stuff like that. Because when you actually get into like...
And then you have us foaming at the mouth.
Exactly. When I messaged Jess, I was like, do you want an outsider to talk about this? Like, I know we both just like literally jumped with joy about it, but I can't do a better end rant than that, Jessa, so I'm golf clap.
Thanks for letting us rant. If you liked it, share it. If you want to know more, check out the show notes. Whatever you do, keep on disrupting.